Very. Just hold on. Okay, now we're back live here on IFNG. Good evening and good morning. So I think it's morning now in the Philippines because the time zone was really different. So I'm so excited to present this session right now because we have very special guests. And actually, it's a dream come true for me. I'm just, okay, guys, I'm just gonna send it to all of you that before I'm just watching her on YouTube and as well as I'm listening to her podcast. So if you want to, follow them on YouTube and as well as on their podcast, if you are using iPhone or Android, they're available. So without further ado, I would like to welcome. I'm so excited. The title of face their academy is Ielts energy. I hope I can sustain. I'm gonna be on their same level. I'm so excited. So without further ado, let's welcome Jessica Beck. How are you, Jessica?
I'm fantastic. I'm really excited to be here. We have so many nurses in our courses for IELTS, and I know we have a lot of listeners to the podcast as well. So some of my favorite students, I'm honestly telling you the truth now. Some of my favorite students have been Filipino nurses. I swear. Such great students, you guys, like so motivated and hardworking. I've worked with a lot of Filipino nurses that are in the Middle East, like Dubai and Saudi Arabia, and just from all over the world. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, okay, Jessica. First to all our members, please type in on chat box or in our Facebook comment where you are right now watching. So this is gonna be exciting, and I'm so excited, really, Jessica. So yeah, let's start.
So guys, let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to give you some key insider tips for the speaking exam. I know how scary the speaking exam is, so that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, how do I even know about the speaking exam? Well, guys, I was an IELTS examiner for 14 years. So that is thousands of speaking tests that I've done, guys. And I've been teaching IELTS for even longer than that. And like Jeffrey said, I am the host of the IELTS Energy podcast. So definitely check that out, guys. And stay until the end of today's class because I have a special offer that I made just for you guys, just for the Filipino nurses that are watching right now. So stay until the end, guys, because I will tell you about that. So let's get into the speaking tips. Also, guys, if you have any questions while I'm talking, make sure to type them because Jeffrey's going to keep track and he's going to tell me if you guys are asking questions on Facebook. You can also type them into Zoom if you're here. Okay, guys. So in speaking part one, let me tell you the biggest mistake that students make in speaking part one. Students are trying to be too formal in speaking part one. And that means that the vocabulary is wrong and your answers are inappropriate. They can come off sounding too general and too formal. Okay. So for example, guys, if the examiner says, tell me about the house or apartment you grew up in, right? Very common speaking part one question. Here's an example of something I hear all the time that is a mistake. Students say, well, I grew up in a hometown which was very convenient and my house was enormous and amazing. Okay, first of all, there's like no information in there and it doesn't address your personal memories of that question. Guys, in speaking part one, you are asked questions about yourself. They're easy topics and it's informal, right? So the examiner needs to hear personal examples and informal vocabulary. So in speaking part one, guys, you should be using a lot of adjectives and some slang. Okay, let me tell you what the examiner is grading you on for vocabulary so I can prove this to you, okay? In order to get a 7 or higher for vocab, you have to show a range of vocabulary, not just fancy academic words. That's not enough for a 7, guys. You need to show a range. That means slang and idioms in part 1 and part 2, and then formal academic vocabulary in part 3. Okay, so here's an example of a better part 1 answer. So the question is, tell me about the house or apartment you grew up in. I would say, well, to be honest, we moved around quite a bit. I do remember the last house we lived in was nestled in the hills of Carson City, Nevada. And we actually had a hot tub in the backyard, and my friends and I would hang out there. Okay, so do you see the difference in that answer compared to the previous answer, right? Like, it's so much better. So basically, guys, in order to get a 7 or higher on IELTS speaking, you have to be yourself. You have to put yourself into those answers. As an examiner, I don't want to hear the same answers from everybody. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say that where they live is convenient and nice. Guys, take those 2 adjectives just out of your vocabulary, okay? Don't say convenient, don't say nice anymore, because I promise you, every other IELTS candidate is saying exactly the same thing. So again, guys, to get a 7 or higher, you have to stand out, right? You have to put yourself in your answers. That's what the examiner wants. So the easiest place to do that is in part 1, okay? All right, guys. So let's talk about part 2. Now, we talked about for part 1, the mistakes people make, and then I told you how to do better, right? So let's do that for speaking part 2 as well. Here is the number 1 mistake that students make in speaking part 2. You guys are trying to answer all of the bullet points on that cue card. What that does, it lowers your fluency because it sounds unorganized, and it's really hard to talk for 2 minutes if you're only looking at the bullet points, okay? Let me give you the insider tip here. The examiner does not care about the bullet points, you guys. When I was an examiner, I didn't even look at those bullet points because it's not part of your grade, okay? The examiner does not care about those bullet points. So then the obvious question is, why are they even there? So the only reason those bullet points are there, you guys, is to help students that can't think of a lot of ideas. Oh, I better let people in. It's just to help students who can't think of enough to say. Okay, that's it. That's it. So what you should be doing, guys, is only looking at that first line of the card, okay? It's always like describe something, describe an event, describe an object, describe a person, describe a place. Those are the 4 main topics of speaking part 2. So what you guys need to practice, and this is hard, but again, this is how you get a 7 or higher, okay? What you guys need to practice is telling a story about part 2. So you can see a lot of examples of this on our YouTube channel, Ielts Energy TV, and also on the podcast, Ielts Energy. We've given a lot of sample part 2 answers showing you how to do this, okay? Now, it is difficult for sure. So let me give you a strategy here to develop a story. I want you to think of 3 things: before, during, and after. Guys, this works for everything. So for example, here's a tough part 2 card. Describe an object you bought but never use. Now, if you just follow the bullet points for that card, right? Describing an object card, you definitely will not be able to fill the 2 minutes. I mean, can you talk about one thing that you don't use for 2 minutes? No, of course you can't, guys. And if you want a 7 or higher for fluency and coherence, you need to fill that entire 2 minutes, guys. you need to keep talking until the examiner asks you to stop. That shows fluency. That's a 7 or higher. Okay. So describing an object I bought but did not use. How do I turn that into a story? I could talk about before I bought the object, like why did I buy it? What made me buy this? How did I find it? What store did I go to? Did I use a website? How much was it? How did I choose it? And then during the middle part of the story, I talk about buying it, coming home with it, or receiving it in the mail, what I did immediately, like unwrap it and get excited or whatever. And then the third part of the story, the after, I talk about why I never use it and maybe what I use instead. So for example, let's see. Something I bought but did not use. I'm looking around. Oh, I actually have a really good example. Okay, check this out, guys. I bought a big whiteboard because I thought that it would like help me organize my time or whatever. So if I'm telling a story about that in part 2, I would talk about feeling overwhelmed and too busy. And I would list all of the things I have to do, like coach my son's soccer team, work, write books, be a mom, walk my dogs. And then I would talk about the process of buying this whiteboard, how I chose it. And then I would talk about how I actually brought it with me to different places and I never used it. So that is an entire story that I could easily fill 2 minutes with. Okay. I also need to point out, guys, that something important for what the examiner needs to hear in part 2, I need you to notice that every part 2 card is singular. Okay. So for example, it's describe a person, describe a time, a place. So you guys need to focus on that one thing. That's another mistake I hear a lot of students make in part 2, and it does lower your fluency score. If instead of talking about the one person or the one place, you start listing a bunch of things, a bunch of people, a bunch of places. So the reason why that hurts your score is because there's no development of your ideas. And this is something that it's a very hard skill, but you need to learn the skill and practice it for both speaking and writing task 2, guys. Examiners don't need lists. I never want a list in speaking and writing. I want you to tell me an idea and develop it. Okay, so that means you are able to expand and explain your ideas with plenty of details and examples. Okay. Let me give you one more tip, one more strategy that I have found helps a lot of other students in part 2, especially if you're describing like a place or a person. Try to, in that minute you have to prepare and take notes, try to develop a very clear image in your mind. Okay. Because your goal to be a fluent communicator, right, for a 7 or higher, your goal is to also create a strong, clear image in the mind of the examiner. So your words must be detailed and specific enough that I can picture exactly what you're talking about. Okay. So let me give you a way to practice developing fluency for part 2. Okay, guys. One thing to do is to get a part 2 card and practice it 3 times in a row. All right. Because every time you practice it, you're going to be able to be more confident and add more details. Okay. You're practicing becoming more fluent. So again, guys, you can just do this like 2 or 3 times a week. And I promise you, it will improve your part 2 answers within a couple weeks. I promise, I've seen it happen. So again, get one part 2 card, set your timer, right? Answer for 2 minutes, and then do the same thing again. Do that 3 times, guys. And it is an amazing way to develop fluency. All right, guys. I'm going to look in the chat box here on Zoom real fast. Someone from KSA and so Kuwait. Okay, awesome. Welcome, guys. All right. So remember, if you have any questions on what I'm saying, please type in Facebook and Jeffrey will let me know, or you can type in Zoom, okay? So far, we've talked about part one. You need to have informal vocabulary like slang and idioms, and you need to give personal examples that bring your personality into the test. It's relaxed in part one, okay? And to summarize my part two advice, guys, for fluency and coherence and vocabulary, you need to develop a story, okay? So the strategy there is to talk about before, during, and after. And again, guys, you can see videos about this on our YouTube channel, Ielts Energy TV. Okay, guys, so let's talk about part three. Now, the examiner doesn't grade you on each part. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not listening to you and writing down, oh, 6 for part one, 7 for part two. Like, that's not what I'm doing as an examiner, right? I have to give you one score that is an overall average of your entire performance, right? So every part is important. However, guys, last impressions matter. You know what I mean? Like, you still have to do well in part three if you're going to get that 7 or higher. Okay. So it's definitely worth having some specific strategies for these questions because every part is different on speaking. Okay. As a side note, before I get into a part three strategy, I do want to mention pronunciation real fast. Okay. For a 7 or higher for pronunciation, I know that a lot of students are worried about their first language accent. You know what? It's not as important as you think, okay? As long as I can understand you, you're fine, okay? What is more important is the variety of your intonation and stress. So again, let's go back to part one. You need to sound relaxed. You need to sound expressive in part one, okay? Because you're talking about things, hopefully, that you're interested in. In part two, also, you need to show whatever emotions you have about that story, okay? Now, in part three, it's different. Part three is serious. These are formal questions. So your pronunciation changes, okay? There's more downward intonation in part three. And here's a last pronunciation tip, guys, before I go into the part three strategy. For part three, guys, slow down a little bit, okay? This is natural, all right? And remember, for a 7 or higher for pronunciation, I need a range, just like vocabulary. I need a range. You need to show me that you can be expressive according to what you're saying. So if I'm talking about something serious in part three, I'm not going to speak really quickly and excitedly. You know, I'm not going to sound very positive when I'm talking about climate change. So in part three, guys, remember, slow down a little bit. It's natural. And make sure that your intonation is more downward, okay? Because we're serious in part three. All right, now, part three. As I did in the first two parts, guys, let's talk about what students do wrong, and then I'll tell you how you can correct that. So one issue I see most often with candidates in speaking part three is that they're struggling to give specific responses, right? So a lot of students are staying too general and they're worried about what the examiner wants to hear. Now, what I mean by that is like you're trying to be too fancy or too formal. So for example, that will lead you to be too general as well. Let's go back to this topic of climate change, right? So maybe the part three question is, let's see, what are the biggest problems that climate change is causing, right? Now, I don't want to make a list. I don't want to say, well, the weather is getting worse. There are heat waves and droughts and the ice caps are melting and people are hungry because there's not enough food and animals are dying. Okay, that's not a good answer. Okay, never make a list in speaking and writing. So instead, I want to develop it. Okay, remember we talked about this, developing an answer with specific details and examples. So maybe I'll just choose one or two of those and go into detail. Now, what sort of details can you give in part 3? Here is another insider tip, guys, that I don't hear a lot of students using because I guess they don't know. I guess they haven't taken our course or listened to our podcast. In part 3, guys, you can, and in fact should, give personal examples. Okay, think about it. I mean, if on the speaking exam, I don't have access to a computer. I can't look at my phone and find a news article or a research study, right? So you can't give those as examples, but you must give examples of some sort. So go to your personal experience as your number one stop. Okay, so for example, going back to that climate change question, I would support my answer by describing the heat wave that Portland, Oregon experienced last summer, how we hit record temperatures, hottest of all time. And then I would talk about the impact that had on the city, the citizens, and my life. Okay, so it's still formal, right? But I'm going to my personal experience to support my answer. All right. So again, guys, in speaking part 3, you have to get specific. Okay. It could, if you read the newspaper every day, you could definitely get ideas from there. I do encourage Ielts students to be reading the newspaper, not every day, but a few days a week, guys, because you need ideas, right? So you could get ideas from there. But again, guys, the easiest place to go is your own personal experience. All right. So here is a last thought on that. You guys are adults, right? You have a life of experience. You've lived in probably a couple different countries by now. You have experience with different countries, different cultures, work experience as well, right? You're an adult with a life of experience, so you can access that. You do have ideas. And this is actually a good place to summarize this idea, guys, of confidence, all right? This is one reason why students stay too general in speaking part 3. And if you stay too general, guys, you cannot get a 7 or higher for fluency, and you cannot get a 7 or higher for vocab. Okay, for a 7 or higher in both of those categories, you have to get specific. Okay, now lack of confidence, that holds students back from putting in their own ideas and their own opinions. So just remember what I said at the beginning of this class, guys, is that you have to put yourself in your answers. Okay, I can promise you, if you can do that, you sound more confident, you sound more fluent, right? And that is the only way that you're going to get a 7 or higher, okay, on the speaking test. All right. So let's get into some questions here, guys. Before I look at these questions, I want to remind you that we do have an Ielts course. I put all of my 14 years of examiner experience in there, and it is guaranteed to increase your Ielts score. As I said, guys, I made a special discount for just people watching right now. So if you go to allearsenglish.com/nurses, you can get the personal coach package, which includes lessons from me and my co-host Aubrey, one-on-one lessons. You can get that package and save $50 with the coupon code NURSES. It's all about you guys today. So again, if you want to check that out, it's only available for the next hour though. Go to allearsenglish.com/nurses, coupon code NURSES. Easy to remember. All right, guys, let's get into some questions here. All right, let's see. Tommy says, can we say that we don't have an idea on the topic, especially in part 3? Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, we want to prevent that from happening. That's obviously not ideal, right, Tommy? So you need to be reading the newspaper, reading books, watching movies. You need to be immersing yourself in as much information in English as you can. So hopefully you have ideas for everything that they'll ask you about. Having said that, there are some really weird questions in part 3. But remember, guys, it's a speaking test. All right. You have to speak. So you can't just say that you don't know. That is not an option if you want a 7 or higher. You cannot say that. But what you can do is be honest about your lack of experience. Say that in a natural way, which I'll tell you how to say that in a second. And then you have to add something connected to the topic. So for instance, what if the question is, trying to think of a question that I wouldn't have an answer for, which is tough because I've answered all the Ielts questions. Let's see. Let's say, okay, will air travel disappear in the future because of environmental challenges? Now, I've actually seen that question on the test, and it's really hard, this question. So if like maybe you're nervous and your mind goes blank and you freeze. And so what you could say is, I apologize. I actually don't have an idea right now for that topic. Honestly, my mind is going blank because I'm so nervous. But what I can say is that I hope airline travel doesn't disappear because traveling is one of the greatest passions of my life. In fact, next summer, I'm going to Tokyo, whatever. So, okay, here's what I did there, guys. I narrated honestly my thoughts. Okay. So again, here's a phrase you could use. I apologize, but my mind just went blank because I'm so nervous. You can also say something like, I have so much writing on this exam that I am extremely nervous right now. Okay. And then you have to follow that up with something else because it's a speaking test. So instead, go on to say, but what I can say is, and then you have to say something related to the topic. Okay. You're not graded on your knowledge. I mean, the examiner doesn't expect you to know everything. Okay. But guys, at the end of the day, it's a speaking test and you have to say something. You have to speak English. Okay. So say that you don't have knowledge on the topic. Maybe say how you will learn about the topic and say something connected to the topic. Okay. All right. Here's another great question. How to start part 2. Oh, I love this question. Okay. We talk about this in the course, but I'm going to tell you now. So here's what to not do. Do not say, I am going to describe a person in the news. If that's a topic, right? Describe a person in the news, common part 2 topic. So don't say that. Also don't say, I am going to tell you about a person in the news. Guys, I know that a lot of textbooks and even teachers have told you guys to introduce your part 2 like that. A, it's so boring. That's such a boring way to introduce part 2. And B, so many students are saying that, guys, so you're not standing out, right? And C, that is so not natural. A native speaker would never start their part 2 like that. So here's a quick strategy, guys. I saw Jeffrey get back on here. So let me give you a quick strategy for how to start part 2 in a more natural way. Say how you felt when you saw the topic. Okay. This works for everything. So in that example I just gave you, to sound more natural, I would say, to be honest, I was a little overwhelmed when I saw this topic because I read the news every day and I am inundated with people that I would actually like to talk to. Whatever. It doesn't have to be true, but that's a great way to introduce part 2. Okay. Just say how you felt or what you thought when you saw that topic card. Okay. Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going? All right. All right. So Alicia says that your IELTS exam is in 2 weeks. Okay. I hope you have a very solid study plan for those 2 weeks. Here's another piece of advice, guys, since I mentioned a study plan. every IELTS candidate needs a solid study plan. Okay. In 3 Keys IELTS, our course, we give you a 30-day plan and a 60-day plan, and it tells you exactly what to do every day. Here's the thing about preparing for IELTS. It's kind of a part-time job. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just testing skills. It's not just math problems. It's testing skills and English. So while you're learning all these IELTS strategies, you need to be improving your English at the same time. So that's why a study plan is so important, guys. Again, we have it in 3 Keys IELTS, allearsenglish.com/nurses. Coupon code nurses. Oh, somebody unmuted. That's all right. Okay, let's see. And so Lords asks, in part 1 and 3, how many sentences are we going to develop for every question? Okay, awesome. That's a really good question. Here's what I tell you in 3 Keys IELTS, okay? In part 1, you want to answer in 3 to 5 sentences. So it's not too short, not too long, right? And in part 3, your answer should be close to a minute. So I would say between 45 seconds and a minute for your part 3 answers. However, these are very general rules, guys. Don't try and make every answer the same, because again, like, that's not natural. You're gonna have more to say about some topics than other topics. All right. So again, trust yourself. I hope you guys can feel the confidence in your own speaking, that you can trust yourself to say enough, right? That you have enough to say. Okay. But again, those guidelines, 3 to 5 sentences in part 1 and close to a minute for part 3 answers. All right. All right. JJ, I just want to ask if we can use the word you on part 3 instead of them. That's a really interesting question. So usually in formal English, we don't want to say you, right? So in IELTS task 2, guys, don't say you, okay? It's very informal. However, in speaking part 3, avoid it if you can, because if you say you, it's like you're talking directly to the examiner, which you shouldn't do, okay? It's not a real life conversation, it's a test. I know I'm telling you, you have to be relaxed, but it's still a test, right? So try not to address the examiner directly. Don't ask me questions. Examiners don't like that, okay? I ask you questions. You're not supposed to ask the examiner questions. I mean, don't be like, well, what do you think about climate change, Miss Examiner? Like, you're not going to say that. So avoid saying you if you can. But if it comes up, if it's just like a general statement, it's fine. Okay. Just don't address the examiner directly as you. All right. Mimi says, watching from Canada, welcome. Is it only speaking that you can offer in your program? No, we cover everything. That's why we can guarantee your score will go up, guys, because we cover everything. Listening, reading, writing, speaking. It's both general and academic. There's 2 choices. So if you go to allearsenglish.com/nurses, you'll see you can choose academic or general. We also offer the computer delivered IELTS version of the course. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and sign up, and then you could email me and I could help you out to switch to that computer course as well. Okay. So yeah, we cover everything, and we have all the practice you need as well. So practice tests, all of the exercises are exactly like IELTS, and I give you all of the model answers. Okay, so you can check them against your own work. So yep, it's all in there. You don't need any more books. You don't need anything. All you need is in there. All right, Alicia says nervousness to the extreme. So here's the thing, guys. We have an extra module in 3 Keys IELTS called the anti-anxiety module, because like Alicia's saying, nervousness to the extreme. I know how terrifying this can be for you guys, because your future can depend on this test, right? And we recognize that nervousness, getting over that anxiety, is a testing skill. I mean, if you prepare 1,000%, but then you're too nervous on test day to use what you learned, it's out the window, right? It's wasted. So that's why we have a whole anti-anxiety module to help you guys prepare in a calm way. And then on test day, you know what to do when you get nervous. There's strategies for all of that anxiety. Farhad says you speak well, but you laugh immensely. I do. I laugh all the time. You know what? Here's a good point though, guys. If you are choosing someone to learn from, I hope you are choosing someone who engages you. Who like you want to listen to. I really want students to be engaged in what I'm saying. And I want you guys to feel positive about your own learning experience. I hope you can tell how much I love teaching. And I love teaching Ielts, which is weird, but I do. And that comes through in our lessons, guys. So again, check out our podcast, Ielts Energy, or the YouTube channel, Ielts Energy TV. All right, guys, before we run out of time here, I want to remind you that only for the next hour, I have that discount for you guys, $50 off. You can go directly to allearsenglish.com/nurses and use the coupon code nurses to save $50. All right, I have time for a couple more questions, guys. And then I'm going to have to sign off, but I do want to do this again. Let's see. JD says, what if the questions are just really new to us? It's going to be really hard to provide answers in 2 minutes. Prepare widely. Let me give you another resource, guys. If you just Google conversation starters, or even search 250 conversation starters, you can get whole lists of amazingly weird questions. I like having students prepare with this in addition to IELTS questions, because guys, remember, if you only practice IELTS answers, it's not going to be natural English on test day. Okay, so you need to practice otherwise as well, and that includes speaking. So look for conversation starters. Challenge yourself to answer 3 of those questions every morning, and you're going to be ready for anything. Okay. But remember, if it is something you honestly have no idea about, you still have to talk. Okay. So say why you don't know about it and how you'll learn about it. All right. Simple strategy there. JD says, is it okay to use adjectives like honestly in the introduction of your answer? Yeah, for sure. Just don't repeat it. A lot of students learn like 1 or 2 filler phrases and then they use them in every answer. So yeah, that's fine, but don't use it all the time. And here's the last thing I'll say about this, guys. Make sure that your filler phrases are appropriate. So, common filler phrase. That's an interesting question. Guys, there are a lot of questions that are not interesting. And so that makes no sense. Okay. So for example, what if I say, tell me, let me see. What if I say, what time do you wake up in the morning in part 1? And then you go, that's an interesting question. No, it's not. It's not interesting, guys. So again, filler phrases are great, but don't repeat them, and make sure they're appropriate. Make sure they make sense. All right, guys. Jeffrey, is there any last questions that I should answer, or any last questions from you?
I don't have any question, but I already put in our chat box in Zoom, which is from Madonna and Mimi. She has questions.
All right. Okay. I'll answer 2 more questions. Okay. And then I have more classes to teach, guys. So I hope to see you in the 3 Keys program, guys. Remember, all of my examiner knowledge, everything is in there, and it's guaranteed to increase your score. All right. So Mimi says, how many sessions for speaking with you? I mean, how many coaching speaking sessions? Okay. Yeah. So the personal coach package, guys, what that is it's the entire course, practice tests, everything. And you get 90 minutes of Skype lessons. So most students use that for a 1-hour writing feedback session. where we go over a task 1 and task 2. We give you your scores and tell you how to make them better and what you should practice. And then the 30-minute mock test, where we do a full Ielts mock speaking test. And then we give you feedback on your answers, scores, and tell you how to improve. You can always add more Skype sessions if you want to later, but the thing is, there is so much in the course, you guys. I mean, everything you need to know is in there. So with these 2 Skype classes, one for speaking, one for writing, like that's your chance to test everything out, get your scores and feedback on how to improve, but you can always add more classes later. If you have any questions about this stuff, guys, about the course, you can email me directly, jessica@allearsenglish.com, and I can help you out. Because remember, this nurses coupon code is available for 1 more hour, okay? All right, let's see. Antoinette says, how much does it cost? So usually it's $357 for the personal coach package, but it's a $50 discount for you guys. So it's $307. And that comes with 180 days access or 6 months access. So even if you don't have the exam right away, you could still get in and have 6 months access. Okay. And you have all that time to take those classes as well. So check it out, guys, allearsenglish.com/nurses. I hope I get to work with some of you guys in class. All right. Awesome. Jeffrey, thank you so much for inviting me here to talk to your awesome group of students. This has been really fun.
Well, actually, Jessica, to be honest, it's our pleasure to bring you here. Because I myself, I cannot believe it. I'm just watching and listening to your channel. So for everyone who has questions, I'm gonna post this on our Facebook page tomorrow. So if you have questions, just go direct message Jessica or even their page. Thank you, Jessica, and to all our members. Good
My
morning
pleasure.
and have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Bye.